The transport ship, Unity's Edge, shuddered as it dropped out of hyperspace, its hull scarred from 3 months of brutal fighting against the Vex Collective. Commander Zara Voss limped down the narrow corridor, her left leg still healing from shrapnel that had torn through her combat suit during the siege of Proxima Station. Behind her, the remnants of Earth's 47th Tactical Response Unit moved with the careful precision of soldiers who had learned that every step might be their last. The squad had started with 12 members. Now only 5 remained. Sergeant Mike Chen supported Private Lisa Park, whose right arm hung in a makeshift sling after a Vex plasma burst had nearly severed it at the shoulder. Corporal James Wright moved with a pronounced limp, his knee destroyed when a building collapsed during their retreat from the mining colony on Kepler 438b. Private Danny Rodriguez kept his left eye closed, the socket sealed with medical foam after a close encounter with Vex acid rounds. And then there was Private Sarah Kane, the squad's sniper, who hadn't spoken since watching her spotter die in her arms 2 weeks ago. They were broken, battered, and according to every military regulation in the Galactic Alliance handbook, they should have been medically discharged months ago. But Earth was desperate, and desperate times meant wounded soldiers stayed in the fight until they couldn't pull a trigger anymore. The docking bay of Alliance Station Omega-7 buzzed with activity as ships from dozens of worlds unloaded their cargo of warriors. Zara watched through the viewport as sleek Centaurian fighters emerged from their carriers, their pilots tall and graceful, their equipment gleaming with technological perfection. Nearby, the hulking Krogan assault troops stomped down ramps in their powered armor, each one standing nearly 8 feet tall and bristling with advanced weaponry. A young Alliance officer approached Zara's squad as they disembarked. Lieutenant Commander Thys, a blue-skinned Andorian with the kind of pristine uniform that screamed, "Never seen real combat," looked down at his tablet and frowned. "Earth Unit Designation 47 TRU, he said, his voice carrying the barely concealed disdain that had become familiar to human soldiers throughout the war. "You're assigned to Sector 7. Defensive positions along the eastern perimeter." Defensive positions? Zara stepped forward, ignoring the sharp pain that shot through her leg. "Sir, we've been fighting the Vex for 8 months straight. We know their tactics, their weaknesses." "What you are," Thys interrupted, his pale eyes scanning the wounded humans with obvious disgust, "is a liability. Look at you. Half your squad can barely walk, and the other half looks like they belong in a medical facility, not on a battlefield." Chen started to speak, but Zara raised her hand slightly, stopping him. She had learned to pick her battles carefully, and arguing with Alliance Command had proven to be a waste of time and energy they couldn't afford. "Where exactly in Sector 7? She asked instead. "Guard Post 7 Delta. It's a supply depot, nothing more. Try not to embarrass Earth's military any more than you already have." Thys turned on his heel and walked away, already dismissing them from his thoughts. The 5 humans stood in silence for a moment, watching the Andorian disappear into the crowd of alien soldiers. Around them, the station hummed with preparation for the largest offensive in Alliance history. Intelligence had located the Vex's primary command ship, the Harbinger, hidden in the asteroid field around the dead world of Zerion Prime. Every available ship and soldier in the Alliance fleet was being mobilized for what High Command was calling the final push. "Guard Post 7 Delta, Wright muttered, shifting his weight off his damaged knee. "Sounds like they're putting us somewhere we can't screw anything up." Kane finally spoke, her voice barely above a whisper. "Maybe that's for the best." The words hung in the air like a confession. They all felt it. The weight of their failures, the knowledge that they were no longer the soldiers they had once been. The Vex had taken more than their health. They had taken their confidence, their sense of purpose. Zara looked at each of her people, seeing herself reflected in their eyes. When the war started, she had been a decorated officer with a promising career ahead of her. Chen had been the youngest sergeant in his class, brilliant at tactical analysis and beloved by his troops. Park had been an engineering prodigy who could make any piece of equipment work twice as long as it should. Wright had been a communications specialist who could coordinate orbital strikes while under fire. Rodriguez had been a medic who had saved more lives than he could count. And Kane had been the best sniper in Earth's military, capable of putting a bullet through a credit chip at 2 kilometers. Now they were just damaged goods, shuffled off to the sidelines while the real soldiers won the war. The journey to Sector 7 took them through the station's main thoroughfare, where they passed dozens of different species preparing for battle. The proud Turian commanders studied holographic battle plans with the intensity of artists examining a masterpiece. Solarian infiltration specialists checked their equipment with the methodical precision that had made their race famous throughout the galaxy. Even the normally peaceful Volus had sent traders to ensure the Alliance forces were properly supplied. But it was the humans they noticed most, not Earth's battered defenders, but the other human units that had somehow managed to maintain their strength and equipment. The 3rd Colonial Marines from Alpha Centauri marched past in perfect formation, their armor pristine and their weapons gleaming. The new Moscow Orbital Guard practiced combat drills in the station's gymnasium, their movements sharp and confident. These were the humans the Alliance respected. These were the units that earned commendations and glory. Zara's squad had fought just as hard, bled just as much, but they had the misfortune of being assigned to the worst sectors of the war, where survival was more important than looking good in after-action reports. Guard Post 7 Delta turned out to be exactly what they had expected. A small bunker overlooking a supply depot filled with ammunition and spare parts for the fleet. The position was strategically unimportant, located far from any projected battle zones. The previous occupants, a squad of Asari commandos, had left behind a few pieces of outdated equipment and a message wishing them luck. "Home sweet home," Rodriguez said, dropping his pack on one of the bunks. The depot stretched out below them, a collection of prefabricated buildings and storage containers protected by automated defense turrets. It was the kind of assignment given to units that command wanted to forget about. Chen activated the communication array and began the routine of checking in with station control. Park examined the bunker's systems, immediately identifying 3 different maintenance issues that the previous occupants had ignored. Wright tested the perimeter sensors, discovering that 2 of them were completely offline. Rodriguez organized their medical supplies, which consisted of basic first aid equipment and painkillers that were 2 months past their expiration date. Kane took her rifle and climbed to the bunker's observation post. Through her scope, she could see the vast expanse of space beyond the station, where the Alliance fleet was gathering. Hundreds of ships from dozens of worlds, all preparing to strike the killing blow against humanity's greatest enemy. And they would do it without Earth's 47th Tactical Response Unit. As night cycle began on the station, Zara sat alone in the bunker's command center, studying intelligence reports on her personal tablet. The Vex had been humanity's nightmare for 3 years, an insectoid species that seemed to exist solely to consume and destroy. They had appeared without warning in the outer colonies, their ships emerging from some unknown region of space like a plague of locusts. The first contact had been a massacre. The colony ship New Horizon had transmitted 17 minutes of screaming before going silent. When the rescue fleet arrived, they found the ship stripped clean, its hull carved open like a dissection specimen. The 20,000 colonists aboard had simply vanished, leaving behind only traces of organic matter that suggested they had been processed for food. Since then, the war had been a series of desperate defensive actions as the Alliance tried to understand an enemy that communicated only through violence. The Vex didn't negotiate, didn't take prisoners, and didn't seem interested in anything except the complete extermination of every other intelligent species in the galaxy. Earth had thrown everything it had into the war effort. Entire generations of young men and women had enlisted, knowing they were likely marching toward death. The planet's industrial capacity had been converted to military production, churning out ships and weapons around the clock. But Earth's technology lagged behind the other Alliance worlds, and its soldiers often found themselves equipped with inferior gear and assigned to the most dangerous missions. The 47th Tactical Response Unit had been formed from the survivors of 3 different companies that had been virtually wiped out in the early battles. They had been given outdated equipment, minimal support, and orders to hold positions that everyone knew were indefensible. Somehow, they had not only held those positions, but had actually pushed the Vex back, winning victory after victory through sheer determination and tactical innovation. But victories came at a price, and they had paid it in blood and broken bones. Each engagement left them weaker, more damaged, less capable of continuing the fight. The Alliance Medical Corps had recommended their discharge after the Battle of Titan Station, but Earth's commanders had refused. They needed every soldier they could get, regardless of condition. So the 47th had continued fighting, held together by medical foam, stimulants, and pure stubbornness. They had developed new tactics for fighting the Vex, discovered weaknesses in their armor and behavior patterns, learned to predict their movements with uncanny accuracy. But none of that mattered to the Alliance commanders who judged units by their appearance rather than their effectiveness. Chen approached, carrying 2 cups of synthetic coffee. "Penny for your thoughts, Commander?" "Just wondering if we're doing the right thing," Zara admitted, accepting the cup gratefully. "Maybe Thess was right. Maybe we don't belong here anymore." "With respect, ma'am, that's bullshit." Chen settled into a chair, wincing slightly as his damaged ribs protested. "We've killed more Vex than any 3 units combined. We've held every position we've been assigned, completed every mission they've thrown at us. The fact that we look like hell doing it doesn't change our effectiveness." Zara smiled slightly. Chen had always been able to see through her moments of doubt, had always known exactly what to say to remind her of who they were beneath the scars and bandages. "The others?" she asked. "Park's got the bunker systems running at 110% efficiency. Wright's managed to get those dead sensors online and tied into the station's early warning network. Rodriguez has organized our supplies so efficiently I think we could treat half the fleet if necessary. And Kane..." Chen paused, choosing his words carefully. "Kane's been watching the fleet movements. Says something's bothering her about the deployment patterns, but she can't put her finger on what." That was Kane. Even when she wasn't talking, she was still thinking, still analyzing, still being the best sniper in the human military, despite what the war had done to her confidence. An alert chimed on Zara's tablet, indicating an incoming fleet-wide communication. She activated the display, and the face of Admiral Sarah Chen appeared, no relation to her sergeant, despite the shared name. The Admiral was one of the few high-ranking human officers in the Alliance fleet, a veteran of the early colonial wars who had earned her position through skill rather than politics. "All units prepare for immediate deployment," the Admiral announced. "Long-range sensors have detected Vex movement near the target zone. The enemy appears to be repositioning their forces, possibly in preparation for a counterattack. All combat units are to report to their assigned positions within 6 hours. This is it, people. We end this war today." The communication ended, and Zara stared at the blank screen for a long moment. Around the station, she could hear the sounds of preparation, ships launching, troops moving to their positions, the vast machinery of war grinding into motion. And the 47th Tactical Response Unit would watch it all from their guard post, protecting a supply depot that the enemy would never attack. "Orders, Commander?" Chen asked. Zara stood, her leg protesting but supporting her weight. "We do our job, Sergeant. We guard this depot. We stay out of everyone's way and we try not to embarrass Earth's military any more than we already have. But even as she said the words, she couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong. Kane's instincts were rarely incorrect, and if the sniper was concerned about the fleet deployment, there might be more to this mission than anyone realized. Outside, the Alliance fleet began its final approach toward destiny. The attack came at Aero 347 station time, when most of the Alliance fleet was halfway to the target zone, and the skeleton crew left behind was focused on monitoring long-range communications. Private Kane had been on watch duty, studying the star patterns through her rifle scope more out of habit than necessity when she spotted the first anomaly. "Movement," she whispered into her comm unit, her voice carrying the quiet intensity that her squad mates had learned to trust completely. Bearing 127 Mark 34, approximately 15,000 kilometers and closing. Commander Voss was awake and moving before Kane finished speaking, the months of combat having trained her to respond instantly to any threat assessment from her sniper. Around the bunker, the rest of the squad came alert with the smooth efficiency of soldiers who had learned that survival depended on perfect coordination. "Confirm contact," Zara ordered, pulling up the sensor displays on her command console. The station's automated systems showed nothing. Empty space where Kane claimed to see movement. "I know what I'm seeing," Kane replied, her eye never leaving the scope. "There's something out there, using some kind of cloaking technology. The stars are bending wrong, like light passing through water." Chen was already at the communication array, trying to raise station command. Static filled the channel, not the normal interference of deep space, but the deliberate jamming that preceded an attack. He switched frequencies, then switched again, getting nothing but electronic noise. "They're jamming everything," he reported. "I can't reach anyone." Wright activated the bunker's defensive systems, bringing the automated turrets online and charging their particle beam weapons. Park dove into the technical station, running full diagnostics on every system they controlled. Rodriguez checked their weapons and medical supplies, knowing that whatever was coming, they would need both. "There," Kane said suddenly. "Second contact, bearing 098 Mark 18. Third contact, bearing 201 Mark 45. They're surrounding the station." The sensors still showed nothing, but Zara had learned to trust her people's expertise over electronic instruments. Kane could see things that computers missed, and if she said there were cloaked ships approaching the station, then that's exactly what was happening. "How many?" Zara asked. "At least 6, possibly more. They're big, carrier class or larger. And they're moving in a standard encirclement pattern." Kane paused, adjusting her scope's magnification. "Commander, this isn't a raid. This is a full invasion force." The implications hit everyone simultaneously. The Alliance fleet had been drawn away by false intelligence, leaving the station defended by only a handful of support personnel and damaged units like the 47th. The Vex had somehow learned about the planned offensive and had turned the Alliance's strategy against them. "We have to warn the fleet," Wright said, frantically working his communication equipment. "If they don't know about this—" "They can't know," Chen interrupted, studying the tactical display. "Look at the timing. The fleet is committed now. They're already engaging the Vex forces at Zerion Prime. Even if we could reach them, they couldn't turn back in time to help." Zara felt the familiar weight of command settling on her shoulders, the burden of decisions that would determine whether her people lived or died. The smart move would be to evacuate the bunker, retreat deeper into the station, and try to reach the evacuation shuttles before the attack began. But the smart move assumed that survival was more important than duty. "How long before they reach optimal attack range?" she asked Kane. 18 minutes, maybe 20. They're taking their time, probably scanning for defensive positions." "And the station's automated defenses?" Park looked up from her technical station, her face grim. "Offline. Someone transmitted a virus through the communication array before they started jamming." The automated systems are completely compromised. So the station is defenseless, Rodriguez said quietly. 30,000 people, and no way to protect them. Zara looked around the bunker at her damaged squad, seeing the same realization in their eyes. They were 5 wounded soldiers with outdated equipment, facing an invasion force that had just outsmarted the entire Alliance military. By every tactical assessment, they should run. But Earth's 47th Tactical Response Unit had never been good at following tactical assessments. Kane, what's your effective range with current equipment? The sniper checked her rifle, running through mental calculations. 22 kilometers with standard rounds, maybe 25 if I push it. But Commander, these aren't infantry targets. Those are capital ships. Not the ships, Zara said, her mind racing through possibilities. The weak points. Every Vex vessel has external sensor clusters, communication arrays, weapon mounting points. If we can't destroy them, maybe we can blind them long enough for the station to evacuate. Chen was already accessing the bunker's tactical database, calling up everything they knew about Vex ship designs. Here, he said, highlighting key areas on the display. Primary sensor cluster is usually mounted dorsally, about 300 meters back from the bow. Communication array is ventral, near the engine assembly, and their plasma cannons have external targeting systems that are vulnerable to precision fire. That's assuming I can even see them clearly enough to target specific components, Kane pointed out. These aren't ground targets. They're moving spacecraft under cloak. You'll see them, Zara said with absolute confidence. When have you ever missed a shot that mattered? It wasn't really a question, and Kane didn't treat it like one. Instead, she began breaking down her rifle, quickly modifying it with spare parts that Park had scavenged from the bunker's equipment locker. Within minutes, she had converted her standard infantry weapon into a specialized long-range precision instrument. Wright managed to establish a weak connection with the station's emergency broadcast system, just strong enough to transmit locally. If we can buy them enough time to reach the evacuation base. Do it, Zara ordered. Emergency evacuation, all civilian personnel to report to evacuation stations immediately. Military personnel to defensive positions. The klaxons began blaring throughout the station as Wright's message spread through the emergency network. In the corridors and living quarters, 30,000 people suddenly found themselves racing for safety, while 5 humans prepared to hold off an invasion force. Park had finished her modifications to the bunker's power system, routing energy from non-essential systems to boost their defensive capabilities. I can give you maybe 40% more power to the sensors and weapons, but it's not going to last long. Maybe an hour before the whole system overloads. We'll take it, Zara said. She turned to Rodriguez. Medical supplies? Enough stims to keep us conscious for about 6 hours, assuming we don't take any major hits. Basic trauma equipment, but nothing that's going to help if we take direct fire from a capital ship. Then we don't take direct fire. Zara activated the bunker's command protocols, bringing all systems to full combat readiness. Kane, you're our eyes and our primary weapon. Chen, tactical analysis and target prioritization. Right? Keep trying to reach anyone who can help. Maybe there's a patrol ship close enough to respond. Park, monitor all systems and keep us running. Rodriguez, medical support and backup targeting. The squad took their positions with the practiced efficiency of soldiers who had fought together for months. Outside, the cloaked Vex ships continued their approach, invisible to every sensor except the enhanced vision of one damaged sniper who had learned to see death before it arrived. First ship is entering extreme range, Kane reported, her voice steady despite the magnitude of what they were attempting. I can make out the distortion pattern now. Definitely hive class, maybe bigger. 2, 3 weapon clusters visible. Paint the target, Zara ordered. Kane's rifle whispered, the sound suppressed to nearly inaudible levels. 23 kilometers away, a bullet that should never have been able to reach its target somehow found the primary sensor cluster of a cloaked Vex capital ship. Sparks erupted in the vacuum as sophisticated scanning equipment died, and suddenly the massive vessel became visible as its cloak flickered and failed. "Target painted," Kane confirmed, already tracking her next shot. "They know we're here now." The Vex ship immediately began evasive maneuvers, but it was too late. Chen had uploaded its position to every automated defense system still functioning on the station, and particle beam turrets across 3 different sectors opened fire simultaneously. The capital ship's shields flared and held, but now it was committed to a firefight it hadn't expected. "Second target," Kane called out, her rifle tracking another distortion. "Bearing 145 Mark 67. Another whisper, another impossible shot, another cloaked ship suddenly revealed to the station's defenses. But the Vex were adapting quickly. The third ship dropped its cloak voluntarily, accepting visibility in exchange for full maneuverability, and began moving directly toward the station at maximum acceleration. Its plasma cannons charged with the distinctive green glow that every Alliance soldier had learned to fear. "Incoming fire," Wright announced unnecessarily. Everyone could see the massive energy buildup as the Vex ship prepared to demonstrate why capital ships didn't engage in surface bombardment, because nothing on a space station could survive it. Kane's rifle spoke again, but this time her target wasn't a sensor cluster. Instead, she aimed for the plasma cannon's external targeting array, the delicate equipment that allowed the massive weapon to achieve pinpoint accuracy. Her bullet struck home just as the cannon fired, and instead of destroying a section of the station, the plasma blast went wide, missing by nearly a kilometer. "They're going to keep coming," Chen warned, watching the tactical display as more ships dropped their cloaks and began direct approaches. "Even if Kane can disrupt their targeting, there's too many of them." "Then we make them think twice about it," Zara replied. She activated the bunker's missile systems, loading their few remaining warheads with Park's jury-rigged modifications. "Kane, can you target their engine assemblies?" "Negative. Too much armor, and the angle's wrong from here." Kane paused, studying the approaching ships through her scope. "But I might be able to hit their communication arrays. If they can't coordinate..." "Do it." For the next 10 minutes, the impossible happened. 5 damaged humans, armed with obsolete equipment and refusing to accept tactical reality, held off a Vex invasion force. Kane's rifle sang its deadly song, picking off critical systems with surgical precision. Chen coordinated defensive fire from every remaining automated turret on the station. Wright managed to establish contact with a lone patrol ship 2 hours away, desperately calling for any reinforcements that might exist. Park kept their systems running far beyond their design specifications, pushing every component to its breaking point. Rodriguez monitored Kane's condition, keeping the sniper supplied with stimulants and medical support as the strain of impossible shots began to take its toll. But it couldn't last forever. The Vex ships were massive, heavily armed, and commanded by alien intelligence that was rapidly learning to counter human tactics. One by one, they began adapting their approach, using their superior numbers to divide the station's defensive fire while closing to ranges where even Kane couldn't help. "Commander," Wright called out urgently, "I'm getting something on the emergency channel. It's the fleet. They're turning back." "What?" Chen looked up from his tactical display. "The mission was a trap," Wright confirmed. "Admiral Chen is reporting that the Zerian prime target was empty, just automated decoys and sensor ghosts. The real Vex force was here all along." Zara felt a cold certainty settle in her stomach. The Alliance had been completely outmaneuvered, their entire strategy turned against them. The fleet was racing back, but it would be hours before they could arrive, and the station would fall long before then. Unless 5 wounded humans could find a way to hold the line. "How long until fleet arrival?" she asked. 4 hours minimum, Wright replied. "And that's if they push their engines past red line." Kane's rifle fired again, but this time the shot went wide. The sniper was reaching the limits of her enhanced medication, her hands beginning to shake from exhaustion and chemical strain. Around them, the bunker's systems were starting to fail as Park's modifications finally exceeded their tolerance levels. "I can't keep this up much longer," Kane admitted, her voice tight with frustration. "The shots are getting harder, and my equipment's starting to fail." But even as she spoke, something changed in the tactical situation. The Vex ships, which had been pressing their attack with typical alien ruthlessness, suddenly began to pull back, moving to longer ranges and adopting more defensive postures. "What are they doing?" Rodriguez asked, studying the display with confusion. Chen was running calculations, his tactical mind trying to understand the enemy's sudden change in behavior. They're afraid of us." "Afraid?" Zara couldn't keep the disbelief out of her voice. "It's 5 humans with broken equipment against a capital ship formation." "That's exactly why they're afraid," Chen explained, his voice filled with sudden understanding. "Look at what we've done. We've disabled multiple capital ships, disrupted their coordination, held them off for 20 minutes with small arms fire. From their perspective, this isn't a guard post. It's a heavily fortified position manned by some kind of super soldiers." Kane managed a tired laugh. "They think we're the elite unit." And in that moment, Zara realized that maybe they were right. Not because of their equipment or their official designation, but because of what they had become through months of impossible battles. The 47th Tactical Response Unit had been forged in the fires of war, tempered by loss and pain, and transformed into something that even the Vex had learned to respect. They were Earth's wounded warriors, and they had just reminded the galaxy why humans never surrendered. The standoff stretched into its 3rd hour, with the Vex invasion force maintaining a cautious distance while the 5 humans held their position in the bunker. Kane's hands had steadied as the initial chemical rush wore off, replaced by the cold focus that came when a sniper found her rhythm. Park had managed to stabilize their failing systems by cannibaling parts from non-essential equipment. Wright maintained his communication efforts, serving as the link between the desperate station and the racing fleet. But it was Chen who made the discovery that changed everything. "Commander," he said quietly, his voice carrying the tone that meant he had found something important. "I've been analyzing their movement patterns, and there's something odd. They're not positioning for a siege, they're positioning for extraction." Zara moved to his station, studying the tactical display. The Vex ships had indeed arranged themselves in a pattern that seemed designed for rapid departure rather than sustained assault. "What are you thinking, Sergeant?" "I think they're waiting for something. Or someone." Chen highlighted several data points on his screen. "Look at the formation spacing. They've left clear corridors here, here, and here. Those aren't attack vectors, they're escape routes." Kane's voice came from the observation post, still steady despite hours of tension. "Movement in the asteroid field bearing 032 Mark 12. Single ship, massive signature. Oh hell, it's huge." The new contact appeared on their sensors like a mountain materializing in space. The ship was easily 5 times larger than the capital vessels already surrounding the station, its hull covered in the organic curves and spikes that marked it as a Vex construct. But this wasn't just another warship. The energy readings indicated command and control functions that far exceeded anything they had encountered before. "The Harbinger," Chen breathed. "It's not at Xerion Prime. It's here." The revelation hit them like a physical blow. The Harbinger was the Vex command ship, the brain that controlled their entire war effort. If it was here, then the trap was even more elaborate than anyone had imagined. The Alliance fleet had been sent to attack an empty system while the real prize came to them. Rodriguez looked up from his medical station, his face pale. "If that thing is here, then this isn't about conquering the station. They're after the fleet itself." An ambush, Zara realized. They let us think we found their hidden base, drew our entire force into a single location, and now they're going to destroy us all at once. The tactical situation had shifted completely. The station wasn't the target, it was bait. The 30,000 people aboard weren't hostages. They were leveraged to ensure the fleet came racing back into the waiting arms of the Vex ambush. And the 5 humans in Guard Post 7 Delta weren't insignificant guards. They were the only ones in position to do something about it. "How long until the fleet arrives?" Zara asked. 2 hours, 15 minutes, Wright replied, "and they're coming in fast and hot, expecting to rescue survivors." "They're going to jump right into a killing field," Chen said grimly. "The Harbinger will coordinate a crossfire from every Vex ship in the system. Our fleet won't stand a chance." Kane's rifle fired again, the sound sharp in the bunker's confined space. Another Vex sensor cluster died in a shower of sparks. "I can keep harassing them, but I can't damage something that big. We need a different approach." Zara stared at the tactical display, her mind racing through possibilities. The Harbinger was too large and too well protected for conventional weapons to affect it significantly. The station's defensive systems, even at full power, would barely scratch its shields. And they had no way to warn the fleet about the trap they were racing toward. But they did have something the Vex hadn't accounted for: human stubbornness and the willingness to attempt the impossible. "Park," she said suddenly, "what would happen if we overloaded the station's main reactor?" The engineer looked up sharply. "Complete destruction of the station and everything within about 50 kilometers. Why? Because 50 kilometers puts us right inside the Harbinger's defensive perimeter." Zara pulled up the station schematics, studying the reactor placement. "If we could get close enough." "Commander, that's suicide," Rodriguez protested. "Even if we could somehow maneuver the station into collision range, we'd never survive the blast." "No," Chen said slowly, understanding dawning in his voice. "But we don't need to. We just need to damage the Harbinger enough to disrupt the ambush." Kane lowered her rifle for the first time in hours. "You want to ram a space station into their command ship." "Not ram," Zara corrected. "We're going to make them think we're ramming them, force them to react, and use their response to break up their formation. If we can scatter their ships, create enough chaos—" "The fleet might have a chance," Wright finished. "It's crazy enough that it might actually work." Park was already running calculations on her technical station. "I can rig the station's maneuvering thrusters to provide enough acceleration for a short-range intercept course, but it's going to take at least 40 minutes to set up, and once we start, there's no stopping it." "And the evacuation?" Rodriguez asked. "Should be complete by now," Chen reported, checking the internal sensors. "The last shuttle left 20 minutes ago. It's just us and the automated systems now." Zara looked around the bunker at her squad, seeing the same determination she felt reflected in their eyes. They had been dismissed as damaged goods, written off as too wounded to matter in the real war. But here they were, in position to strike the decisive blow that might save the Alliance fleet. "This isn't a direct order," she said carefully. "If anyone wants to try for the evacuation shuttles—" "With respect—" "Commander," Kane interrupted, "shut the hell up. We're Earth soldiers. We don't abandon our posts." The plan came together with the frightening efficiency of soldiers who had learned to improvise under pressure. Park began the delicate process of reprogramming the station's maneuvering systems, converting the massive structure into a guided missile. Wright established a coded transmission protocol that might get through the Vex jamming long enough to warn the fleet. Chen coordinated their defensive fire to make it look like they were fighting desperately to prevent exactly what they were actually trying to accomplish. Rodriguez prepared medical support for the inevitable consequences of their actions. And Kane returned to her rifle because someone had to keep the Vex honest while they worked. "First thruster modification complete," Park reported after 30 minutes of frantic work. "Activating attitude control now." The station shuddered as massive engines fired in sequence, slowly beginning to rotate toward the Harbinger's position. The movement was barely perceptible at first, but the Vex ships immediately reacted, moving to intercept what they obviously interpreted as a desperate ramming attempt. "They're taking the bait," Chen observed, moving to defensive positions around the Harbinger. Kane's rifle whispered again, targeting the sensor array of a Vex ship that was moving too close to their projected course. "They're trying to get targeting locks for their main guns. I'm keeping them honest, but there's too many of them." 30 more minutes, Park called out, sweat beading on her forehead as she worked to maintain control of systems that were never designed for this kind of abuse. "I can give you 30 more minutes before the reactor cascade becomes irreversible." Plasma fire began lighting up the space around the station as Vex ships opened up with their secondary weapons, trying to disable the maneuvering thrusters without destroying the station outright. They wanted to capture the facility intact, which gave the humans a small advantage in the form of enemy restraint. But restraint had limits, and the Vex were beginning to realize that stopping a space station in motion required more than gentle persuasion. "Multiple contacts launching from the Harbinger," Kane reported. "Fighter craft moving to intercept." "How many?" Zara asked. "Too many to count. Hundreds, maybe thousands." Kane tracked the swarm of small craft through her scope. "Commander, they're not trying to stop us anymore. They're trying to evacuate their own people." Chen looked up from his tactical display, confusion evident on his face. "That doesn't make sense. The Harbinger can take a direct collision from a space station, their shields alone." His voice trailed off as understanding hit him. Wright was the first to speak the realization aloud. "They're not afraid of the collision," he said quietly. "They're afraid of us." "What do you mean?" Rodriguez asked. "Think about it from their perspective," Chen explained, his voice filled with sudden excitement. 5 humans with obsolete equipment have held off their entire invasion force for hours. We've damaged multiple capital ships, disrupted their coordination, and now we're somehow moving a space station to ram their flagship. They don't know how we're doing any of this." Kane laughed, the sound sharp and dangerous. "They think this is just another human trick. They think we have a plan that makes sense." "Do we?" Park asked, not looking up from her work. "Hell no," Zara admitted, "but they don't know that." The evacuation of fighter craft from the Harbinger continued as the space station slowly accelerated toward its target. More Vex ships moved to intercept, but their fire remained restrained, ineffective. They were treating the approaching station like a sophisticated weapon rather than a desperate gamble. "Fleet contact," Wright announced suddenly. "Admiral Chen's task force is dropping out of hyperspace in 30 minutes. She's requesting immediate tactical assessment." "Send this," Zara dictated quickly. "Harbinger confirmed at Omega 7. Ambush formation disrupted. Approach with caution and prepare for immediate engagement." The message would have to be enough. There was no time for detailed explanations, no opportunity to describe the insanity of their situation. 20 minutes to reactor cascade," Park announced. "Once I trigger the final sequence, we'll have maybe 5 minutes before the explosion." "Long enough?" Chen asked. "To scatter their formation and give the fleet a fighting chance? Maybe. To get away ourselves?" Park shook her head. "Not even close." Kane fired again, her shot taking out the targeting computer of a Vex heavy cruiser that was moving to block their path. "Then we better make it count." The final phase began with Park's hands dancing over her control systems, triggering the cascade that would turn the station's reactor into a massive bomb. Around them, the bunker's systems began the subtle changes that indicated impending destruction. Lights dimming, equipment shutting down, the background hum of power systems shifting to a more ominous tone. "Cascade initiated," Park reported. 4 minutes, 30 seconds to detonation." The Vex response was immediate and desperate. Every ship in their formation opened fire simultaneously, abandoning all pretense of restraint. Plasma beams and particle weapons lit up space like a deadly fireworks display, but it was too late. The station's momentum carried it forward, and even the combined firepower of the invasion force couldn't stop it in time. Kane continued firing until her rifle's power pack died, then calmly loaded a fresh one. Harbinger is launching everything it has. Evacuation pods, fighter craft, even cargo shuttles. They're abandoning ship. 3 minutes, Park announced. Wright looked up from his communication station. I'm getting scattered transmissions from Vex ships. They're breaking formation, moving to minimum safe distance. 2 minutes. Chen pointed to his tactical display, where new contacts were appearing at the system's edge. Fleet arrival confirmed. 37 ships led by the carrier Indomitable. They're moving to attack positions. 1 minute. Zara looked around the bunker at her squad, seeing pride mixed with acceptance in their faces. They had done the impossible, turned a hopeless situation into a strategic victory, saved the fleet, and probably dealt a crippling blow to the Vex war effort. The fact that they wouldn't survive to see the outcome seemed almost irrelevant. 30 seconds. Kane set down her rifle and moved away from the observation post, joining her squad mates in the bunker's central area. It's been an honor serving with you all. 10 seconds. Park's finger hovered over the final control. Then she smiled and looked at her companions. See you on the other side? The explosion lit up space like a newborn star, washing out sensors across half the system. When the light faded, the Harbinger was listing badly, its shields down and its hull cracked along multiple stress lines. The Vex invasion force was scattered across thousands of kilometers, their coordination shattered and their command structure crippled. And in the expanding cloud of debris that had once been Alliance Station Omega-7, the Alliance fleet found something that would become legend throughout the galaxy. Buried in the wreckage of Guard Post 7 Delta, protected by an emergency shelter that should never have survived such a blast, 5 human soldiers were found alive and still at their posts. They were unconscious, badly injured, and would require months of medical treatment. But they were alive, and their impossible victory had saved not just the fleet, but quite possibly the entire war. Later, military historians would spend years trying to understand how 5 wounded humans with obsolete equipment had accomplished what entire battle groups had failed to do. They would study the tactical decisions, analyze the technical innovations, and debate the strategic implications. But for the soldiers of the Alliance, the explanation was much simpler. The 47th Tactical Response Unit had reminded the galaxy that humans didn't surrender, didn't retreat, and didn't know when they were beaten. They were Earth's wounded warriors, and when the moment came to stand and fight, they had shown everyone, human and alien alike, what that really meant. The war would continue for another 6 months, but the tide had turned. The Harbinger's capture provided intelligence that allowed the Alliance to track down and destroy the remaining Vex strongholds. And at every battle thereafter, when soldiers faced impossible odds and hopeless situations, they would remember the story of 5 humans who turned a guard post into a fortress and a space station into a weapon. They called it the Silent Shot Campaign, after Kane's nearly inaudible rifle that had started the impossible chain of events. But the veterans who served there had a different name for it. They called it the day the wounded got their revenge.